Welcome to the Startup Grind.
I'd like to introduce you to Ben Pickering tonight. Ben grew up in Silicon Valley. He moved to Vancouver in 2009. He has a bachelor's degree in economics and an MBA from Stanford. He's worked at Yahoo and eBay, and he was the CEO at Strata. Most of you know that company here. And currently, he's the president and chief operating officer at SoMedia Networks. So let's welcome Ben.
Thank you.
Awesome. So you grew up in Silicon Valley. Do you think that that had a big part on who you are today and what you're working in?
Yeah, without a doubt. So growing up in Silicon Valley was tremendous in terms of just the exposure to technology. I didn't necessarily grow up around a bunch of entrepreneurs. Most of my friends' parents worked at companies like Hewlett Packard and Intel and kind of big tech companies, but was always surrounded by this environment of technology being the number one thing. So in high school actually I did a summer job, like internship at Apple. This was during the John Scully era, so it wasn't quite the heyday of Apple, but I got to play around with like the Newton tablet that they were developing at the time, and things like that. Just getting exposed to that definitely drove my interest in technology. But it wasn't until later that I decided I wanted to work in startups and that sort of environment.
Cool. So being an entrepreneur, that was a conscious choice you made, not really by accident.
Yeah. So I think of myself as entrepreneurial, but not necessarily the prototypical entrepreneur. So I definitely view myself as an operator in the business and somebody who, my background being working at a couple larger companies, as you mentioned, eBay and Yahoo, with the MBA that I have, that's all great management training. And, I think there's two kinds of people that I see. There's the true entrepreneurs who have the big idea and just chase after it. And there's people like me that try to help guide them and kind of grow in an intelligent manner. Sometimes rein that in and sometimes figure out how to channel it. And so that's really how I view myself in terms of the scope of entrepreneurship. But having worked, so I don't know what your question list is, but I'll just go through the.
Go for it.
I'll just kind of walk you through my experience and how I ended up, I guess, where I am. So, in my undergraduate time at Stanford was really the beginning of the internet. So, Netscape IPO'd, Google actually launched at Stanford when I was there. Like, we were playing around with that. And, for me, that opened up some interesting opportunities. I was actually going to take a job at Morgan Stanley on Wall Street in New York, and then I had an opportunity to go work in PricewaterhouseCoopers was launching a technology mergers and acquisitions group in their Silicon Valley office. So it was just focused on advising high-tech companies on investments and acquisitions in other tech companies. So for me, I thought this would be great exposure. Went there and had the opportunity to work with like Yahoo acquiring broadcast.com and a number of like big deals, and really got excited about the potential of the internet. And as it happens, a colleague from PwC left and joined a startup company called Spinway, which the founder of that company, I believe, is here somewhere, Danny Robinson. So that was my first startup experience, and I joined the company. I was like the 10th employee. We were, working out of Danny's garage. The full startup.com experience. We, grew from 10 people to 110 people. raised a bunch of money, developed some really significant strategic partnerships, became at one point in time the fastest growing internet service provider, and it was awesome, and I loved that. And then my path took me down a couple other avenues. Eventually ended up working at Yahoo for a number of years in a big corporate environment, and realized that I really loved the excitement of smaller companies and growing businesses, and the opportunity to shape that and to do things that have a much more immediate impact. That was the biggest thing for me at Yahoo, was being such a large company. It was really difficult to get things done. There was 10 layers of management for everything. Spent a year involved in a project that was redesigning the Yahoo homepage, and it was like literally to move one pixel on that page, it was months of user testing and everything. So farthest thing from lean. And so the opportunity to then go to Strata and come in and be part of a small organization where if you want to make a change, you can do it and have it done at the end of the day, and test it, and that's what's really exciting me.
Awesome. That was a great whole background for us.
Sorry, it was more than I wanted.
That was perfect. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the lessons that you learned from working at those smaller companies, such as Spinway? What are the biggest lessons you learned from that?
Well, the biggest lesson I learned from Spinway, I think Danny would agree, is revenue is important. This was the heyday of .coms, and so we did what we were supposed to do, which was attract users and eyeballs, and the monetization was going to come after, and it would have given more time. And there's other companies, another specific company that was a little bit further ahead of us and was able to IPO, and so they had capital, they had money in the bank, and they were actually able to prove out the model. And so I think that experience certainly, and the whole .com of the boom and bust and everything, definitely shaped me in terms of being conscious of the need to have customers who are willing to pay for your product.
Fair enough. Did social play at all in that role of you growing so fast?
No, this was before the days of social. This was when, so we were an internet service provider competing with AOL and the like, and literally distributing CD-ROMs with software that you could install. So we leveraged a partnership network, and so I was in business development building these partnerships with major retailers like Costco and Barnes & Noble and Kmart and others who distributed our product at point of sale. So it was not
very old school.
It was not the social viral model.
So then you got involved with Strata, and you were the CEO of Strata for a while. How did that come about?
Yeah, so that came about, after I did my MBA, so when I was at Stanford Business School, I was debating which direction I wanted to go. I knew I wanted to work in technology and in the internet sector, and was debating about whether I wanted to do startup or something bigger. So for my internship between my first and second years of business school, I was on the verge of doing an internship with Friendster. Most of you have probably heard of them, mainly through the Facebook movie. Some of you may have used them back in the day, but and I decided, well, maybe I should go work at a bigger company, get the experience there, learn the best practices. So I went and did my internship at eBay, and then I went to work at Yahoo after. Sometimes I wonder, well, if I'd gone at Friendster, who knows? Maybe it would have led me down the path of going to work at Facebook when they were, real small. But I was really interested in social networks at that point in time, and so, I went to Yahoo. One of the things that attracted me there, one of the groups I was supporting was called Yahoo 360, which was their social network that they were launching, and needless to say, it failed, but it was an opportunity to start to work in that space, and it was really really interesting. I moved around to a couple of different roles at Yahoo, and then ultimately when I decided I wanted to get into an earlier stage company, I reconnected with Danny, who, he'd started Spinway down in Silicon Valley. He'd moved back up to Vancouver, and I actually connected with him because I wanted to bounce an idea off him for something I was thinking of starting. And he managed to turn the conversation into, hey, I've started a company up here, and I think could really benefit from leadership like yourself. Are you interested? And so I came up, and I think when I came up to visit, it was like one of the warmest days ever in Vancouver. It was like a beautiful sunny day. It was like and BCTIA I think was doing like their cruise. So like Danny and Maura took me out on the BCTIA cruise, and it's like, I'm like, oh man, Vancouver's amazing.
So it really swept you off your feet
Yeah, I
there?
was like, what are people talking about rain? Okay. So, no, but more importantly, the team, there was a small team at Strata at that point, met the team, really liked them, saw an opportunity with the product, which, was built, but again, hadn't really started to sell into many customers at that point, and, saw an opportunity to take that and start to tie it in more with the social stuff, as Facebook marketing was just starting to emerge. And so I jumped on that opportunity and came up here and fell in love with Vancouver, met my wife, and worked with the team at Strata to build that into a company that became one of the first Facebook preferred developers in Canada, working with lots of big brands and agencies to run social media promotions for them.
Cool, yeah. So, going a little bit more into that, becoming one of the first Facebook preferred developers, how was that journey, becoming that, and is there any secret sauce there for success?
Having friends at Facebook. That seriously. At that point in time, they had a pretty small program, and a lot of people that I knew from Yahoo had gone to work at Facebook. And so, I was able to at least get a foot in the door there. And then, it was really, they, wanted to see some proof of what we could do. So we had some client work we were able to show them. And then they eventually said, okay, we're going to open up, we're going to do another cycle of admitting some new people into the program. So, at least we were in line to get on board there. And, that was definitely a helpful thing to us, having their endorsement and being able to have that sort of validity definitely helped the business.
So make friends at Facebook is
make friends at big powerful companies.
Awesome. So social was kind of starting to play a big part at Strata. What were some of the strategies you used to help you grow so fast, help the business grow?
Yeah, our business was, and the company still is, focused on helping brands leverage social media, specifically Facebook, to grow their own business, right? As far as what we did, we used social media and content marketing strategies to try and build our own business. And the company was bootstrapped, so we, our customer growth really came through our efforts around social, around blogging, guest blogging that I was able to do, and speaking, and word of mouth, and all of that. So definitely we saw the results, and were able to, see that can work.
Cool. Over the last couple of years, you mentioned content. We've really started to see the rise as content is king. How do you think that has played a part for you both now at your position and also at Strata? And how do you see it continuing to evolve?
Yeah, I think, content marketing and content in general is vital these days. I think the old models of how you sell and how you get somebody through the sales cycle has changed dramatically. Whether that's selling to a consumer or especially in the B2B space, which Strata is really a business like a B2B2C type of play, and at SoMedia it's similar. So people who are out there looking for stuff they want to read about what you're doing. They want to feel like you're a thought leader, to use that expression. That you know what you're doing. And so having the content out there that speaks to that is really essential in helping people get comfortable with your brand and really get further along in that process. So when they're finally talking to a person, you're a lot closer to closing that sale.
What about for companies that might not have a big budget for creating content? What advice do you have for them?
I mean, I guess that's the beauty of it, or that's why content has become such a popular marketing tool, because it doesn't really cost a lot. It's time. You need people to write it, but the distribution channels now with social and things like that make it so much easier to disseminate the content. And so you don't need to rely on the traditional paid media as much as you used to. And so, I think there's plenty of stories out there of smaller companies who've been able to, use blogging and use social media to kind of kickstart things, and not have to have a big budget to do that.
So I mean, like, a lot of companies use Twitter and Facebook and try to reach their customers through social, but still getting new customers for any new venture is challenging. What were some of the strategies that you actually employed through social to get those first new customers?
So I wouldn't say that we use social to get the first customers. I think in general, your first customers are going to be people that or if you're just starting a business, you want to go where the lowest hanging fruit, so to speak. So I think social generally comes in a little bit later, but what we found, at Strata, when we had customers using social media to help, to talk about us, that was one of the biggest things. And so I think that's one of the powers of social media, is being able to, to leverage that. So it's not just you talking about yourself, but you start to get other people sharing your content, and that's where it becomes really powerful.
Awesome. What do you see as being some of the biggest trends for marketing in 2014?
Shameless plug for SoMedia. I'll say video, because we're in the business of video production. I think that a lot of the trends, and things that we've seen over the last year will continue. Social is obviously huge. I think social ads is going to continue to become an even bigger thing. So more marketing budget going towards advertising on platforms like Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Facebook's been doing that the longest, but I think you're going to see a lot more coming out of both Twitter and LinkedIn in terms of what they make available to advertisers. I should have prepared.
No worries, we can move on. So going back to SoMedia, since you did have that shameless plug there, let's talk about that. What has it been like for working for a public company, because they went public last year?
Yeah, that's definitely been a different experience and a good contrast to what I've done before. So I've worked at big public NASDAQ listed companies, but TSX Ventures is a little bit different than NASDAQ. And so, for us, and the company went public last June or July. I just started in October, so I wasn't there for the whole process leading up to the IPO. But it was really another step in terms of fundraising. So wasn't like the Facebook IPO or kind of the end goal. It was really a way to access new sources of capital for the company. And so from that standpoint, it's been great, because we do have the ability to raise capital, I would say, a little bit more easily than we might otherwise. But it also comes with challenges in terms of, there's reporting requirements to the exchange and things that, become a little bit more of a burden on the company than when you're private. So that part has been a learning experience, but overall it's good.
Speaking of raising capital, what's your opinion on companies raising capital before achieving revenue?
Well, I think a lot of companies need to raise capital before achieving revenue. So, I think my general philosophy is if you have access to the capital, you should go after it. As long as it's on reasonable terms. I think it really depends on the business though, and what you're going after. And if you have a business that requires large scale and you need significant market share, obviously all businesses want significant market share, but there's some that can be grown more organically and kind of taken to a point where you're already profitable or close to profitable and can then raise capital on much favorable terms. eBay is a great example of that. They never needed to raise money, but eventually they got to the point where they're like, okay, we've got a business model, we know it works, but how do we get this thing huge? And so then you take on money. In other cases, there's companies that need a lot more money early on before they're even able to come close to profitability. Facebook being a great example of that. So
cool. So for service-based businesses, just wondering what would be one thing you wish you could have told yourself when you were first starting in all of these businesses that you've been involved in?
For service-based? I would say don't be in a service-based business. No, dealing with clients in a service-oriented business is challenging, for sure. So if you can build a true SaaS business model that you don't need to be providing hands-on service, yes, do that. But I think one thing I do believe is there's been, I think, some negative feelings about services, and probably because of some of these challenges that come with it, but also because historically, there's been maybe lower valuation placed on a services type of business. A lot of companies then feel like we just need to be a product and we can't do services. But the reality is services can be very lucrative. They can help you fund the development of product. Invoke is a great example of that. It was a services company doing consulting work and then being able to develop in-house technologies like Hootsuite, right? So that model, I think, is something that people need to think about. And then on the other side of it, in the big scale, you look at companies like IBM where most of their revenue comes from services. So I think services get a bit of a bad rap, and I probably contribute to that. But I would say, be strategic about what where your clients are, what they need, and if you can provide services that are going to help them more effectively use your products, or you can use that revenue coming in from services to fund other product development, then I think it's a good thing.
Cool. What are some of the challenges you're running into right now, and what strategies are you taking to overcome them?
Frankly, the biggest challenge we face, which a lot of companies do, is sales. So when I joined the company, so prior to me coming on board, the investment was really in building out a large network of reseller partners for our video solutions. And it was mapped out that this would be a 3-step process of bringing people on as partners, getting them comfortable in understanding how to sell video and understanding what we offer, and then obviously seeing the results of that. So we've moved past phase 1 and we're kind of in between phase 2 and 3 now, where we've got thousands of small to medium-sized digital agencies and web marketing companies who are signed up to offer video solutions to their clients. And I think we found that there's a bit more of a learning curve in getting them up to speed on why video and why it's essential for their clients. And now we're starting to see more of them coming back to us and wanting to order video. So that's a process and something that we're still working through, but that's certainly the biggest thing that's on my plate to work through.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about some of the things you've done as a startup advisor. In October, you wrote a post for Huffington that in business, bigger isn't always better. Can you elaborate a little bit on some of the ideas you talked about there for us?
Sure. Yeah, and I think it's a double-edged sword here because there is a reputation, especially in the Canadian startup community, that Canadian entrepreneurs don't think big enough. And obviously people like Ryan Holmes are trying to debunk that myth. But I do think that there's, it's important to look at the business you're building and the opportunity you're going after, and it goes back to your question about raising capital as well. Decide, are you trying to build a huge business, or are you comfortable building a business that, I don't like the term lifestyle business because people use that, but even if you're building a smaller business that's doing $10, $20 million in revenue, like, you're working really hard. That's not like a lifestyle where you just are kicking back on the beach. So I think my point in the article was really just to not necessarily only look at the company who IPOs for multi-billion dollars as a success, because there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there working really hard building companies that can be successful in their own right. And so just keeping that in mind.
Cool. Why do you think that Canadians have this reputation of not thinking big enough?
Well, I mean, I do think that in general, compared to Silicon Valley, there is a more conservative approach. And I think it's less with the entrepreneurs and more with the investors here, because they're definitely more conservative and prone to, they want to invest in mining stocks. Although mining stocks are like speculative and risky, so I don't totally understand that. But when it comes to technology, my experience is that there's not that many that are willing to just take the bigger risks that in Silicon Valley is commonplace. So, I think that kind of permeates it. And then, you see and you hear about the common stories of Canadian companies that are successful and maybe sold out too early. That's kind of the, I think, prevailing, again, myth that gets perpetuated. Companies like Flickr, which sold to Yahoo and, had it stayed independent, who knows, like, could have been bigger than Instagram or something. But again, that's where I think that's not necessarily a bad thing, because now you've got one of the founders of Flickr who's starting he started a new company here and has potential to be a really big company. So I don't know if I totally agree with it. I mean, I do think there's no place in the world, frankly, that's like Silicon Valley. So, just the way that investors think about things and the way that entrepreneurs think about things down there is different. Just the whole mindset is a bit different. And so, I think for anyone who has the opportunity to go spend some time down there, if you're an entrepreneur, I think it can be really eye-opening. I don't advocate that you move your company down there. And a couple of the companies that I've advised, the founders have gone down and spent some time in the valley and come back, and it's been a really eye-opening experience for them, just to see the way people think. And they do oftentimes think bigger. So
You started companies both in the Valley and here. Do you think it matters where you start your company compared to the Valley or here?
No, I firmly believe that good companies can be founded and succeed anywhere. I think that's been proven now, and you know, it was probably, well, it was definitely different 20 years ago, and you know, you're a company and you're in the computer business, and you know, you want to be close to Intel because they're your supplier. You know, those sorts of things where location mattered, whereas in the online world, it's a lot less important. So I think with the whole growth of the internet, we've now seen that successful companies can come out of anywhere. You know, I think, again, there are certain advantages to being there. I mean, there is a larger pool of capital, there is a larger pool of talent, but it's a more expensive pool of talent, and there's, you know, there's more distraction, frankly. I mean, sometimes being a bit removed from Silicon Valley can be a good thing for a business to focus early on and really focus on building your product, and maybe even having to work a little harder to find those first reference customers and things like that.
When you're advising startups, either here or in the Valley, what are some of the bigger challenges or like ones that keep coming up that you found from early stage startups?
Raising money.
Aside from that. And what's your advice to them?
Yeah, I mean, I said somewhat in jest, but I mean, the raising money thing is, you know, the biggest thing that comes up, and advising companies up here, it has come up multiple times about, you know, should we try to raise money in Canada? Should we try to raise money in the US? And so, you know, I think it's a very real thing to consider. Beyond that, though, I think I'd say the biggest thing that comes up is really just around, I'm trying to think, there's kind of a couple things, but just trying to figure out what the right point in time is to begin hiring more people has come up. And this is like for early stage, right? So, and it ties back to raising money as well. So most of the companies I've been working with have been on the path of, you know, let's try and get as far as we can before we take on
more people
and more money.
Okay, that's good advice. Just a couple more questions. Are there any really important books that you've been reading lately that you think we should all be reading?
I just read a book called Give and Take. Just good, interesting. Basically looking at different types of people who are either givers or takers in terms of their work style and just philosophy. And it talks about how people who are more of the giver tend to be at the bottom in terms of performance or success on a number of metrics, but they also tend to be at the top, and the takers were in the middle. So it's kind of interesting. So it basically talking about people who are, you know, more giving of their time and more willing to collaborate and cooperate, but you don't want to go too far because people will take advantage of it, right? So you need to be able to do it in the right way, and if so, that has tremendous long-term benefits. So I thought that was a pretty interesting book to read, and they go through some good anecdotes of people, including a major venture capitalist who, people thought he was too nice, like he was basically giving away deals to other investors and things like this, right? Like when other people would have just held it for themselves. But ultimately, as a result of this, he built up a network and relationships that paid off big time because he got in on some really big deals.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming today. We'll now take a couple questions from the audience. If you guys have any questions, yeah.
I'll get to that.
So I was hoping you could maybe talk a little about the evolving role that you have going into a company that has 10 people and say it's growing up to 110 or 150 or more than that, and kind of the role that you're playing at the beginning and how that changes over the life of your work there.
Okay, good question. Yeah, and I think in my experience that there's probably some inflection point that's going to be different for every company in terms of when it's going to transition from the pure startup and really small group of people to something slightly more mature. I think that tends to happen maybe around 20, 30 people. In terms of what that means for any individual or for myself, I think the most important thing is trying to maintain the culture, and I think that's one of the challenges as you grow is trying to, the people who are there early, keeping them feeling like this is still the startup and the excitement that they got on board with. As you start to bring in place, more people, more potentially reporting structures and meetings and some of those things that are inevitable in larger companies. And so as a manager, I think my role there is to try and to balance that and bring in enough structure and process that things can continue to run smoothly as you bring more people into the equation, without losing what originally makes that company what it is.
Just a question about getting onto the venture exchange. At what point, I don't know, in terms of revenue or employee count or otherwise, is there certain criteria you'd look for in advising a startup, whether they're ready, whether it makes sense to go to the venture exchange?
Yeah, so again, I came into SoMedia after it had gone through the listing process. I think consideration for going on the venture exchange, it's something I would advise thinking long and hard about it, in terms of what are your options for raising capital, and is that what you want to do, just because it does incur costs and additional burden from being there. We went on pretty early, I would say. Early in terms of maturity of the company, because when we listed, we were virtually pre-revenue, very small in terms of sales. And so, now that we're publicly listed and our financials are going to come out every quarter, that exposes us to probably more scrutiny than if we were still a private company. But at the end of the day, you're responsible to somebody, right? Whoever your investors are, ours are, public markets. But if you have private investors, either way, you still have to deliver results. So from that standpoint, I don't see it as a big difference. But certainly, if you can get further along, then I think that's going to be beneficial. But I don't know that I wouldn't give any hard and fast rule, I guess.
Why did you leave Strata?
That's a good question. So I had been there for 3.5 years, helped grow the company from, basically 5 people when I got there up to 15 people. We built a, profitable business, growing, and, it was Danny and I sat down and talked about where we wanted to see the company going, and, we had slightly different opinion about what should come next, and agreed that it was a good time to maybe make a change, and so that was that.